Here with, hi everyone, it's me here with Viral Wisdom number 65. I try to come every Sunday to continue my sharing of my heart, my thoughts, my feelings about what we're going through together collectively. So this is number 55. Many of you have been following all my Viral Wisdoms and tracking me through this pandemic. So thank you for being here and say hello. Tell me where you're from. I'm watching you come on in on Facebook and Instagram. Hi guys, tell me where you're signing in from. Hi Alicia, Yesinia, Hani. So today I just want to talk about our collective emotionality. I, in my own life, have lost a very dear family member recently, last week, and the whole energy around grief and what that holds for us, what that means for us is very palpable for me, very tangible for me at this time. So I just want to share some of my feelings, and maybe you can drop into your heart and find that place that can connect more deeply, that can touch your own authentic expression more solidly, and we can find a way to make sense of life and of life right now. We are all going through this collective grief. We have been going through it more intensely than ever during this pandemic. And grief, is such a portal for deeper meaning, for deeper presence. But it can only be such a portal if we open our hearts. And when we open our hearts to grief, we find its treasure. Even though it's so painful, even though it cracks you, you feel like you can't breathe, you feel like your heart is going to be in a million pieces, there's something that happens that is the treasure of grief. And what happens within you, if you allow it, is that you feel for the first time perhaps what it means to be alive. And what it means to be alive is to be completely in the here and now. Grief does that to you. Loss does that to you. And that's why loss is such a powerful teacher. If we lean into loss and allow ourselves to open the heart to what grief can teach us, we learn for the first time what it means to live. Living, by its very inherent implicit definition, means to be fully awake to the fragility, to the impermanence, and to the delicacy of the transience of the present moment. You become so acutely aware that, oh my goodness, I'm alive. Oh my goodness, I'm alive. And suddenly, all the bullshit evaporates. You don't care anymore about how you look, about what people say, about whether your kid gets an A grade or a C grade. Suddenly, the power of grief concentrates your attention, focalizes it in a way that it always should have been. But you realize now, wow, we have been living completely in our ego. And grief brings you to your knees to realize that your ego, all the false things that you have been believing about yourself and others, are a great and fundamental lie. This is the power of grief, and this is the gift of grief, and therefore it is the gift of this pandemic. And when we as parents especially and leaders allow So in America, when our leaders are not able to talk about grief and not touch upon the grief of our common shared current humanity, they expose themselves as being unable to live from the heart. Because to be in grief means to open the heart. And if there is anyone right now on this globe who isn't feeling grief, that means they are not in their heart. Period. It is a portal to enter life for the first time. And this pandemic is allowing us to enter life for the first time. You know, I just recently began saying, nobody should be an elected official, leave alone our president, until they have gone and worked at a hospice center for the terminally ill for a year. That should be the requirement to become an elected official. That should be the requirement to become a parent. Because until we understand death here and stare at it in its face and at its highest core, unadorned exposure, we will not open our hearts and we will keep living in our ego. And if you know my work, you know that my work in parenting is all about the dismantling of the parental ego. But how can we dismantle the parental ego until we dismantle the parental ego? And the parental ego will not be dismantled. The ego of humanity will not be dismantled as long as we are stuck in our complacency of comfort and continuity and our pretense that life is forever, and our pretense that we are superior, and our pretense that you and I are different, and our pretense that we are not animals, and our pretense that the earth doesn't matter. So it takes grief to dismantle the ego. It takes grief to break us open. And we are in collective grief. And even in collective grief, we have hatred. Even in collective grief, we cannot open our hearts. When else are we going to open our hearts, people, if we cannot open our hearts now? If we're still arguing about Black Lives Matter, if we're still arguing that women need to be treated better and animals and our earth has a deep and dying death wish that we stop, if we keep ignoring, then we're losing. This is one of our last wake-up calls, and of course, I don't know what is in the future, but it just is a profound invitation to shake humanity. Grief, 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 grief. Grief does that. Loss does that. 200,000 people have died in the US, okay, approximately. So many more have shattered their lives, have encountered job loss and faced unemployment. Grief, grief, grief. And for our leaders to not talk about it, to not touch it, to not use this moment to bring us together is a sacrilege. But we don't wait for leaders, you see. Who are the leaders? You, me. So this is the time you reach out to your neighbor, you reach out to your children, you reach out to your partner and you go, I am so sorry. I have been living in ego. I have been caring about my money and my bank account and how I look to some stranger on Facebook. I am so sorry, my child, that I have driven you crazy to live in the future. I get it now. I have been avoiding the reality of life. And now I see that the reality of life is only in its transience, is only in its fragility, is only in its utter, sublime impermanence. There is no other reality. So whatever other reality I was living in the future, tomorrow, yesterday, holding on to grudges and resentment and hating, was all me in ego. There is no one to hate. There is no one to be divided. There is no other. Whatever the other is experiencing will be experienced by you. Know this. If grief hasn't palpably opened the door of your house and sat with you on your couch in this pandemic, it is coming. The pandemic has allowed us to understand that grief is the portal to understand life. And if we are not understanding life, which is to understand that we only have the here and now, and therefore we must live with our hearts open, therefore we must abandon delusions of separation, then we are missing the whole point. Even if you don't believe in wearing masks, wear the damn mask. You know why? Because it'll teach you to shut the mouth, shut the ego. Wear the mask. You know why? Because it'll teach you to be uncomfortable, to experience what the oppressed feel, to feel constricted, to maybe gain empathy for what other people go through. Don't wear the mask for you. Wear the mask to understand the fragility of life. It's not theoretical, it's not conceptual, it's not intellectual, it's an emotional grieving that we have to touch in order to crack the heart open. Be uncomfortable. Yes, sit at home more. Yes, we cannot do what we wanted to do. Good. Be uncomfortable, so maybe in the solitude of your sitting at home, sitting with yourself, sitting with your family day in, day out, you can finally turn inward and ask the existential questions of who am I? What am I? Who are we? And perhaps you will reach the irreducible truth of who it is you are, which is dust, only dust. And when you touch that you are dust, you are just dust, 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 dust. Perhaps then the ego will begin to crumble. And when the ego crumbles, something beautiful happens to you. You become open. You become transparent. You become ready to face each other, heart to heart, soul to soul, spirit to spirit. No more agenda, no more ideology, no more beliefs. But this can only happen when you allow grief to crack you open. Empathy, empathy, empathy. Empathy is a high order quality, right? We send our kids to get tested on calculus and the SAT. Yesterday, my daughter went to do the SAT. She was nervous. I said to her, the SAT, I was like, Maya, I know I'm sending you into this doom of SAT. I'm so sorry. I said, but don't be fooled. This is not who you are. The score doesn't make you who you are. Nothing in there is going to change who you are. The only thing you are is your empathy, your kindness, your soul, I told her. I said, that I'll grade you on. That I will push you on. But what you're doing for an SAT exam, that's not who you are. That's some arbitrary standard of some measure that some arbitrary people in some white gilded castle made up. It's not who you are. It is time to see through the matrix of what we have created only based on the crucibles of ego. You know, my daughter is 17, so she's applying to go to college, and the colleges are sending letters. These are the letters the colleges are sending. Oh, we are a test optional college because we believe in seeing your qualities. We believe that we can assess your character based on other things. And I said to myself and my daughter, I said, wow, maybe they're shifting in consciousness and this is the way it should have been. But wow, did it take this for colleges to say we will see your character? Did it take this for colleges to say, you know what, let's be test optional? This is the way it should have always been. Everything should be quote unquote optional because they are of the ego. The ego is always optional. In my book, I don't know, one of my books I wrote, people always ask me, well, how do I know how to create a boundary, you know? So I said to them, well, you decide, is the boundary coming from your ego or is the boundary coming from your essence? Dr. Shefali, what is the difference between an ego coming from the boundary and a boundary coming from the ego and boundary coming from your essence? And I said, the boundaries coming from your ego are all optional. Your life doesn't depend on it. Piano, optional. Trombone, optional. Standing on your head and learning sign language at the age of 2, optional. The boundaries from your essence are life-sustaining. You need them. They are all ubiquitous. They are global. That's how you know if something is coming from the essence or something is coming from your ego. So test optional, now colleges have become test optional because it was always optional. But we pretended it was the Holy Grail. And we fooled our children into believing this is the Holy Grail and that's the Holy Grail. No, it's not the Holy Grail. They were all coming from ego. The only thing we need to understand from this grief, this pandemic, this crisis, is the opportunity to see life as it always should have been seen. Only from our essence. And our essence is dust. So if our essence is dust, nothing really matters except how we are in the moment. And who we are in the moment. And what we are in the moment is connected, interconnected. You are me, I am you. There's no separation between us. All the separation is ideological. It's ego-filled. It's agenda-filled. It's intellectual. It doesn't exist. My beloved who has passed away last week, even he hasn't passed away because there's no separation between life and death. I just can't see. He is only and was only dust. So there's nothing really that's happened except return to dust. So when we understand this, that all separation is ideological, all separation is constructed, it isn't the truth. The truth is that there is no separation. There's interlocking, constant transformation, interlocking, constant cause and effect. Life and death is not a separation. You and me is not a separation. Black and white is not a separation. There's no separation in our essence. Because in our essence, in our core, we are just organisms, biological, life. We are just life. And one looks like a worm and one looks like a girl with blonde hair and one girl looks like a man with dark hair. It doesn't matter. These are the illusions of the external. But in our essence, it's only one. Dust, energy, whatever you want to call it, but certainly not this. So it is time to understand what has been optional all along. All things of the ego that you have driven your children crazy about, driven yourself crazy about, thinking that you matter based on your clothes, you matter based on the likes you get on social media, you matter based on your face, on your body. You don't matter based on that. You just are matter. You matter because you're matter. That's it. And because you're matter, you also don't matter. You are nothing and everything in your irrelevance. Your relevance is your irrelevance. When you understand that, you understand the jewel of life, that life is only lived in the formless, in the shape and disguise of form, life, but it's all in the formless. And once you understand that, you embrace transformation. You release those who have transitioned. You go, I just don't see you right now. And fuck, you left me here, stuck in my ego, damn it. And you celebrate that we have life that looks and can be seen and can be touched in form, and life that cannot be seen and looked at and touched in form. And they both are the same. We just can't fathom the other. There is no separation between black and white. There is no separation between a Muslim and a Hindu. These are ideological separations because the mind doesn't understand the essence of life. And it is time now for us to wake up. What is this pandemic teaching us? What is this collective grief teaching us? It's teaching us to let go of the ego, all the optional, non-essential bullshit. We got to stop. It's all greed, fear, lack, scarcity. Because we live in grief, in greed, in fear, in scarcity and lack, we've created structures. I am Muslim, I am Catholic. These are false structures coming out of fear and lack and greed. I am rich. I'm going to go to the SAT exam when the poor kid in the urban ghetto cannot go. This is the pivotal moment where we get to pivot. This is where we get to wake up. If we don't wake up here in a global pandemic, we are not going to wake up anytime else. And what's happening here in America, I'll talk about this country more. And when I talk about America and that it's founded on racism, people push back on me and go, well, you're an immigrant, you live here, I want to say to everyone, it doesn't matter where we live. to call out what is needed to be called out. If you go to your friend's house and she's being abused by her partner, you got to speak up. And you can't say, well, I don't live with that partner. I don't live in that house. It doesn't matter. If you go to Uruguay or you go to Timbuktu and you see a dog crying in pain on the street, you don't walk by and say, not my country's dog. I don't care. So I'm here. If I go there, I'll talk about there. If I'm here, I'll talk about here. Again, people think because I wasn't born here, I can't talk about what's happening here. Why? Because I have to be blind? Because people are caught up in geography and in nationality. Oh, you're not American by birth. You're not this by that. You're not that by this. Ideological differences created by the ego, creating separation. The dog is the dog. The beaten up woman is the beaten up woman. Racism is racism. It is what it is. Call it where you see it, where you are. Don't wait. Don't be fooled into submission, into silence, because you're not that. Speak up against the injustices. Not with anger or hatred, a little bit of fire, yes. But speak up. It's time. We were the yes generation. We and our parents, we said yes to everything. It's time to stop. It's time to call what it is, what it is. And if people get hurt and white fragility can't handle it, it can't handle it. Doesn't matter. We keep speaking because we know that one day they will handle it. We know that parents one day will wake up, right? When I work with parents, the ego of the parent, more fragile than the white ego. Fragile, fragile, fragile. No parent wants to hear what I have to say, that maybe it's you, right? No parent wants to hear it. So parents say, oh, you're a perfect parent? And I'm like, I didn't say I was perfect. This is not about perfection. This is about growth, about consciousness, about seeing your ego. It's time now for every human and every country to see its ego. In order to see its ego, it needs to see what its psychology was undergirded on. India is the same. I'm Indian, so I'm going to talk about India too, because you'll feel I'm not talking about India and you'll feel like I'm leaving India out, and how could I do that? It doesn't matter. I'm talking about humanity. I'm talking about psychology. India is a label. The US is a label. Catholicism is a label. Judaism is a label. These are labels constructed by man onto its humanity. Humanity didn't say, give me a religion. Humanity didn't say, give me wealth, status, and a zip code. Humanity didn't say, give me nationalities. Animals don't have any of that. Non-human animals. Because in their intrinsic being, there is no ego. Only the specialty of the human has the ego. Rarefied, honed to perfection. And until humanity is willing to see what it is undergirded on, fear, lack, scarcity, greed, fear, lack, scarcity, greed, we are going nowhere. Because we have fear, lack, scarcity, greed, we've created separation. Because we're in fear, we're in scarcity, we're in lack. So we're like, no, I go to the synagogue on Saturdays, you go on Sundays, do your thing, okay? And I'm not American, or I am, or I'm this and I'm not that. All constructed, all a mirage, an illusion. And now let the pandemic shatter this. Allow it, please. Allow the grief of the pandemic to shatter you open, to dare for the first time in your life, to leave your toxic relationship if you need to stop being inauthentic, to stop the facade. Stop. People are dying, transitioning, dying to their old self, to teach us how we have died to our old self. This beloved of mine who has passed lived life so beautifully that every time I think of him, I see in the mirror my non-beautiful ways of living life. I use him now to remind me, hey, wake up. Where are you? Oh, in your ego again? Where are you now? You're here now. Are you living life now? Understanding fully that you are only dust. Anything on top of that is bullshit. That's it. When we realize we're dust, and I see dust in you, and dust in you, and dust in you, I realize, holy cow, we are just dust. So we're the same. I'm not better, I'm not worse. And the pandemic, this virus has shown us, that's why I call it viral wisdom. And who cares whether it was created in China or Japan or the shores of Trinidad? It doesn't matter. It's here to show us symbolically that we are no greater than a virus. And anything we assume to be greater comes from our delusion, from our ego, from our ideological constructs. So it is time now to tap into the shared grief of this pandemic, to tap into what this pandemic is trying to teach us. What is this loss trying to teach me? Instead of panicking and entering hatred and hating on the other and becoming maskers and anti-maskers, lean in. Find out, how can I live a different life? Let me see what it is like to sit at home, to wear a mask, not because you ideologically believe in it or not, but to understand a different way of living. It is time for us to shed all the non-essentials in life. All of them. I mean, once in a while, a glass of wine. But we got to shed the bullshit. We can have the glass of wine, order the red shoes, buy the pretty bag, sure. But please, no longer let it fool you that it is who you are. When my daughter goes for the SAT, as I said, I remind her, it is not who you are. You're just going to have fun, a thing you do for 3 hours, sorry for the torture, but it's not who you are. Who you are is only your dust essence. And when you are in dust essence, you are finally in touch with your fragility. And when you're in touch with your fragility, you are in touch with your humility. And when you're in touch with your humility, you're in touch with your compassion. And now your ego has crumbled and your heart is open. So if you are experiencing real grief that's sitting on your doorstep, or you are experiencing indirect grief through the pandemic, lean into it. Don't be afraid to cry. Don't be afraid to mourn. Don't be afraid to grieve, because it is through that, hopefully, that your ego will shatter enough to understand global grief. The grief of our slaves who came on the slave ships. The grief of the woman who lost her baby in childbirth. The grief of the dog who cries because we're cruel to them. The grief of the horse who's stuck in his stable. The shared grief brought upon by a manic compulsive ego of the human. The human's ego is rampant. The human's ego is out of control. If you can't see it, then nothing else is going to show it to you. And in a way, I'm so grateful to Trump, our president, because I get to see every single day what unconsciousness looks like, what greed, lack, scarcity, competition, separation, division looks like in the human form. And I also see how people who are unconscious follow. And I get angry. And I get into divisiveness and hatred. I do. But then I understand I can't add to that pool. I cannot add to that pool. I must be the light in a different way, but I have to call out unconsciousness when I see it. We have to call it out. And therefore, those of us who see a different possibility for us as humanity need to stand up, stand out, speak up. We need to vote. We need to talk. We need to share. And we cannot be afraid. This is not a popularity contest anymore. Our Earth's survival depends on what we do. It's already, and I hate talking like this, but this is realism, not pessimism. It's already late, if time meant anything. So, wake up or don't. But this is the pivotal point in time. And for me personally, I have chosen to wake up. So I invite you to join me. Speak up. Don't be afraid. There will be those who are unconscious and who cannot wake up. Have compassion that this is not their time. But it doesn't mean you don't stop. It doesn't mean you get defeated. It does not mean that. Our earth is counting on the 5 of us who can wake up. Our children are looking at us and looking at our madness and asking us, are you an adult? I said to my daughter, I'm so sorry you're seeing the idiocy of adults. Even for that SAT test that she went for on Saturday, it was at 7:30 in the morning. I said to her, I'm so sorry. Adults are really stupid. Sorry. Let's have compassion. So this is all we can do, is those who wish to now stop living inauthentic lives, this is your time. The ones who have been waiting to change, what are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? Somebody's approval, somebody's permission? Somebody who you won't see now, maybe because we'll be stuck at home for the rest of our lives? What are you waiting for? You can make whatever change you wish. Of course, you can't change your biology beyond it. You can't change your genetics. But everything else is in the mind. Therefore, you can change it. You can improve your life. You can take a risk. You can start a business. You can find your purpose. You can go volunteer at a hospice. You can do so many things that you've been so paralyzed to do because you've been afraid of what people will say. You've been afraid of not having enough. You've been in lack, in greed, in scarcity, in fear. You've been so busy making money for the future. You've been so focused on your kids being successful. All of it needs to repivot. And all of it needs to be shed. Let this collective grief enter your hearts and give you the direction that you've been longing for. Now the pandemic has come and said to you, come, leave your ego. Leave your falsity. Leave your inauthenticity. Leave your fear. You don't need to have fear anymore. You may only live right now. Come, let's live. Let's live fully. So are you living fully? Are you here? Are you fully in your dust essence? Are you understanding that you are fragile? That you are humble? That you are compassionate? That you are empathic? Do you understand that we need to have tolerance? Do you understand that we need to have a heart? This is the time for the heart. And for those who are not in their heart, we need to have a heart for their lack of heart. We cannot continue the hatred. We cannot continue the divisiveness, but we have to call it what it is. We have to call unconsciousness, unconsciousness. We have to call ignorance, ignorance. The Buddha said the greatest suffering in humanity is because of the ignorance of the human mind. He called it ignorance. He called us ignorant. Because we are. Why are we ignorant? Because we are undergirded on fear, lack, scarcity, and greed. And then we have an ego to protect the fear, lack, scarcity, and greed. The ego of religion, the ego of wealth, the ego of beauty, the ego of competition, the ego of achievement, the ego of success, the ego of parenthood. Ego, 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 ego of possession, of control. Mine. There is no mine. Let this pandemic show you there's no mine. There's nothing that's yours. Because life will take what belongs to it. And we belong to life. We belong to the earth. We belong to the dust. And dust will come back into us in a moment. And all this will disintegrate like this. Because we don't belong to the ego, you see. You don't belong to your home. You don't belong to your synagogue. You don't belong to your church. You belong to life. And life is dust. And until you understand that you belong to life, and life will own you because life owns you, dust owns you, nothing will save you when you are meant to go to dust. Pray as much as you want. Go bathe yourself with your money, right? Look at your face and love its non-wrinkled look. You're still going to be dust. So dust owns you, you are dust. Everything else is extra. So if you're going to do the extra, please know you're doing the extra. So think about it. How do I want this extra to impact me? It's extra. It's kind of a game. It's just non-essential. It's not who I really am because I'm just dust. So if it's extra, think, pause. Do I want this in my life? Do I really need my kid to travel to Portugal and be on some harp, orchestra, symphony? Do I really need that? Let me think. And I'm not putting harp symphony players down. I'm just saying, what do we need? And for the harp symphony player who does that because it's their authentic self, they need to think, do I need to be the best? Do I need to be traveling the world? Or can I just play my harp? All I'm inviting you to do is understand who you truly are. And this pandemic and this grief is the portal. It's the dynamo. It's the grenade that's here to shatter your false self. Let your false self go. Because one day it is going to die anyway, but don't let it die when your true self is dying. Give your true self an opportunity to live life fully, completely as dust. Thank you all for listening, guys. I will see you when I see you in the next dust moment.